Hi, I recently made a video on using a triangle pattern for an edge-to-edge pantograph in beginnings, and tonight we're going to make another video. There are two ways that you can use the triangle. The way that we did in the last video, I chose that for two reasons. You don't have to create a partial row for up at the top, and the second reason was with the method we last used, you could use the exact spot that QCT gave you for zone placement. So this method, we will have to create a partial row at the top. We'll still be creating two files where we created odd and even in the other video. This video will be creating staggered and not staggered, and we will need to measure up from the zone placement point that QCT gives us. So this one is a little more challenging, but you'll be stitching the diamond, so to speak, all at one time. So your diamond will always stitch out very accurate. So I think this is probably the better way of the two. I had thought the other one, but it is hard to get that diamond to really stitch out perfect, where this way it will actually stitch out perfect. So I am using beginnings, and we're going to tap on pantograph. And so what I'm going to do is just show you how I created this pattern right here. I've already stitched out enough rows that I'm ready to advance. I want to show you exactly what I did and then be able to show you here how it looks. So I picked out the triangle pattern because you can see it makes little hearts, and there's a lot of hearts here. So the first thing I did was enter my total width, and then the total height. You're almost going to need to look at your triangle and decide how tall do I want it. You know, take a ruler maybe and just look, and as you look through your designs and think, what size diamond do I want this to be? And then you would enter that for your total height. So let's just say I wanted a 6-inch diamond. I would say 6, but that may change once you pick your pattern. So selecting the pattern, I'm going into triangle, and the pattern I chose was feather. Once you get that one, add a second row and then tap on alternate and flip it. So tap on flip and tap on the arrow, the blue arrow pointing down one time. And now tap on all so that they're both selected. If I tap on this lowest row of hearts and then start increasing the patterns, I can get a good idea of how it's going to look. And then once they start getting close, then I will tap on the upper hearts, and then that connects them. Okay, so at this point, you can look at it and decide, maybe I do want them a little more stretched out, or maybe I want them a little closer. You don't have to go with those hearts. I'm going to go with the 6 because I like it looking a little bigger. This is for Quilts for Kids, and I don't like to do super dense stitching. So when I take a ruler and measure this out, I'm happy with using 6 across. So now I have what I'm going to call my unstaggered row, okay? So I'm going to save this and save it in, I made a folder called videos. So I'm saving it and I'm calling it not staggered. So this was the one that that is already saved, that's not staggered. So we're going to cancel out since it's already saved. Now I want to make it staggered. So what I have to do is tap on move and then tap on the word stagger. And you'll notice they're all selected. Both rows are selected. So when I tap on stagger, now I get my stagger. So I still have this that makes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I still have my 6. And the numbers stay the same. So now this one would be saved as staggered right there, staggered, okay? So we're going to cancel out of that. I now need to create a partial row at the top. So I will need to change the rows to 1, and I'll need to bring the total height down to 3 for one row. So I'll change the pattern height to 3 also. Now I need to flip that, and that takes away the gap across the top. So I'm going to tap on flip and the down blue arrow, and this becomes my partial row at the top. And I like using the staggered one because it gives this nice completion in the corner. I haven't figured out how I'm going to end at the bottom. I'll worry about that when I get to the bottom. But for up at the top, I do want to start out nicely like that. So this will be my very first row, and then my next row would be the non-staggered row. Now that we have all of our 3 files created that we're going to need, we have the non-staggered rows, we have the staggered rows, we have our staggered first row that will be our partial first row. We need to tell how are these 2 rows going to nest together. How will the bottom of one diamond, how will it look nested with the diamond of the next row? Because we're not really able to tell this. So we need to figure that out. So what we need to do is create something that we're not going to use to stitch out. It's just going to be for a visual on this page. So I'm going to add a second row here. And I'm going to change the total height to 6, okay, and the pattern height back to 3. So now we have that, but I need to see how is it going to nest. So I'm going to tap on size and the grow icon. And I'm going to go into the magnifying glass and just really blow it up. So what I'm looking for is this top stitch. What does it align with in the row above it? Because this is the lower row, and then this is the row above it. So what does this align with? So as my eye scans across, I can see that it's even with the upper portion of these 2 feathers, and that it's also even with the upper part of that little diamond right there. So I need to remember that. So I might want to take a picture of this screen, blow it up nice and clear so that I can tell what this is even with. Because that's always going to be your adjusted zone placement spot in beginnings when you have a nested pattern. QCT is going to give you the center, or if you were using the corner, but we're just going to talk center. If QCT is going to give you that center spot that's going to be even with the lowest stitch. So in effect, it would be that one ultimately. So you're going to have to adjust up, okay? You've got to adjust up. So in order to learn where it's going to be, then just look and see what design element in that row above is it going to be even with. So we'll take it back to fit and take it back to that. And now we're going to select the pattern, the first row, and open it as a pantograph. And now we're ready to quilt. Tap on Sew in Zones. And I'm going to say no to this because I will be going back and forth to those same 3 files. So I really don't need a zone file saved. So at this point, I would move my needle to where the center point is, and I'm being sloppy, and I would place it. I do want to show you something I've done, and you will see these brown lines down the side. When you go into plugins, you have something called a marking tool. And this particular quilt is a charity quilt that is not square. I'm not even going to try to make it square. It's not square. So what I've done, just to know that I'm not going to go off the edge, because I'll be using the backing for the binding. So I put my needle right over that edge, okay? And then I tapped on add. I pushed my needle up, did add, and I kept tapping on add till I got up at the top. So that gave me my left line. Now I needed to add a marking. So when you add marking, you have to give it a name or a number. I just named it 2. I'll X out of that. So then I came over here, and I did the exact same thing. I started as far as the machine would let me, and I had the number 2 at this point, and then I kept moving this up and tapping add till I had that. So when I get ready to advance my quilt, I really need to keep it very straight on the rails. So I will leave these in place, okay? I'll leave those in place, and then with my Quilt Advanced, I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to tap on add, remove last. I'm going to tap on add marking, and I'm going to add a number 3, okay? And what I'm going to do is, with the Quilt Advanced, I'm going to make another line. And if I see that my line that I'm adding isn't pretty close to number 1, if it's shifted over to the right or shifted over to the left, I need to do some straightening out. And then I'm going to also add marking 4 over on the right and do the same thing. And my lines 1 and 3 and 2 and 4, they need to really be on top of each other. So when I'm able to add that 3 and 4 so that they are, I'll know I'm good. And then what I'll do is I'll tap on the 1 and 2, and then I'll tap on remove selected, so I don't have 2 lines on either side. And then when I advance the 3rd time, then I'll leave my 3 and 4 there, and I'll add 5 and 6 and make sure that 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 line up on the sides. And I'm adding all this in just because when you're doing a design like this where it's so critical that the triangles at diamonds align with each other, you really want to do a good job keeping your quilt straight on the rails. So hopefully that will be a nice guide for you there. So I'm going to X out of that. So when we were in the quilting interface screen, and I'll just go on back in there. Okay, so when we were in this screen, and I had placed it, then when you get through to the end, and you need to, of course, pull your bobbin over there at the far end, and then you tap on finished. And so what QCT is going to do, because it is beginnings, it's going to go to the center of the lowest stitch. So that's the point that it gave me, okay, is that center point. But I can't use that point, because if I did, then this next row would shift all the way down, and I wouldn't want that. So I'm going to have to measure up. And remember that little diamond? There it is. So I know that when I get ready to quilt this next row, that's going to be my zone spot. So this is the spot QCT gave me, and that's the spot that I know from looking in the magnifying area. That's where the highest stitch of the row yet to come is going to hit. So now that I've quilted that first partial row, then I would X back out, and at this point I would select pattern, and I know that I am ready for the not staggered, because my first row was staggered. Now I need the not staggered. So I'm going to open that as a pantograph, and immediately I'm ready to sew in zones. And one thing I do along the edge here, just to keep me straight, is I know I started out with the staggered, so then I put an N, and then I do an S. And when I get ready to pull my bobbin, when I see this, that's a trigger to me if I've forgotten to go back and switch back and forth. If I haven't done that, then my eye catches this, so I'll be sure that this is my non-staggered row. This is my staggered row. This is my non-staggered row. So it's just a helpful thing to keep straight with that. So I'm going to say no to that question. And again, I'll need to place my zone. So this time I'm placing it over that little spot. Okay, so now let's just pretend we've quilted it all out. So when I get through quilting this second row out, this is the spot that it gives me. But I need to measure up, and I don't have it as easy as I did. So now I know that whenever I do a staggered row, I don't even have to do this if I don't want to, because I know that all I have to do is go up from that bottom petal. Now this is on the staggered rows, okay? But for non-staggered, I'm going to have a little bit of figuring out to do. So this was the spot that QCT gave me. So what I can do is, knowing that this spot is right here, so I tried to mark little dots there so you could see it, because I know that's where, when this row stitches, that's where the highest stitch is going to be. So what I can do is draw a line. So I had drawn a line right there, okay? I drew a horizontal line, and then I want to make sure that I'm staying good vertically, so I lined up with what I can tell is the center, and then I did a cross mark. So I know the intersection of that is where my placement spot is going to be. So this is going to be, at this point I don't have this lower row to go by, but now that it's quilted out, you can see that this is in fact, so this is the top stitch of that next row. It is in fact even with that point. But now that I have this established, here's what I can do. I can measure from the spot that QCT gave me, okay? I can measure that amount, and then whenever I do a non-staggered row, then I can use that amount to measure up, or because of the uniqueness of this pattern, I can also measure from this little, let me find it here, in an easier to see spot. So there's this little crossing right there. So I can also go by that point, and if I do this, I can tell that this is 5/8. So I can also measure 5/8 inch down. Okay, so if you have a spot that's very dark fabric and it's going to be hard, then from the spot that QCT gives me, which I was able to make a little bit, you know, you can just take a piece of tape and lay it down, and then either measure down from a spot or measure up from the QCT spot, put a mark on it, and then maybe I've just stuck a safety pin so that it wasn't going to move. And now when I advance, I'll be able to use that spot. So that's just something that's very critical when you're doing nested designs with beginnings. You always have to figure what is the spot that the uppermost stitch is gonna hit, because that's where my spot needs to be adjusted up to. So when these diamonds stitch out, that's the uppermost stitch of this diamond. So by the time you do it a few times, you will get very, very savvy at it, because you'll get used to doing it for that unique design. So that's the critical thing, is that you remember to keep going back and forth. So now that we've done the non-staggered row and pull the bobbin and figured the zone placement spot, then we would go back, we would select the pattern, and at this point we would select the staggered, and we would say open as a pantograph and go into sew in zones. And no, and at that point, it's probably going to show out of safe area, but at that point, you just do that and you're ready to go again. So it's showing out of safe area because I'm ready to advance. But that's how easy it is. So just as a quick review, what you will have to do is create your pattern, and then you will stagger it. But if you want to write those numbers down or take a picture, I had written them down so that I knew what numbers that I had. In case I accidentally did something wrong, I would be able to recreate them. But once you create the non-staggered row, and then you just stagger them, and all of these numbers stay the same, and then you see what your pattern height is. So when you go to create that partial row at the top, just remember to reduce it to one row and grab that row and pattern height and make that be your total height. And then you're going to flip it so that you don't have a gap across the top. And then to see how they stagger, that's where you're gonna flip these two so that you see where is the top stitch gonna hit in relation to the lower part. So I hope that you have found this helpful. It's pretty cool, it's pretty fun, and it's kind of addicting. So I hope you found it helpful.